Excuse me, but that dock isn't yours. Corinne Whitmore didn't knock, didn't clear her throat, didn't even introduce herself. She simply marched across the fresh mulch of her new neighbor's yard, clipboard in hand, and announced judgment like she was handing down a court ruling. Her new neighbor, David Miller, who had moved in less than 48 hours ago, blinked in the late morning sun. He was crouched beside his boat, fiddling with the engine. The boat looked like it had seen better days, maybe the mid-90s, but the man seemed proud of it. "I'm sorry," David asked. "The dock," Corinne repeated, pointing with the kind of theatrical precision that would have made a traffic cop jealous. "That dock belongs to the community, not you. You'll need to submit a request to the Homeowners Association if you'd like to use it, and that request will go through me." David stood, tall enough that he had to tilt his head to look down at her. He wiped his greasy hands on his jeans, then on a rag. "I thought the property listing said dock rights included." Corinne smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile you'd see from a cat before it pushed a glass of water off the counter. "Listings are written by realtors. Realtors don't make the rules. We do. The HOA governs shared resources, and that dock is a shared resource." A beat of silence passed, then David chuckled. "Well, thanks for letting me know. I'll take a look at the bylaws myself." Corinne's smile flickered, just for a second, before she drew her clipboard close to her chest like it was body armor. "You'll find everything is very clear, and you'll also find that noncompliance comes with fines. We run a tight ship here in Seabreeze Lakes." And with that, she pivoted sharply and power-walked away, heels clicking against the wooden path like a drumline. Later that afternoon, Corinne sat in her home office, which looked less like an office and more like the headquarters of a small intelligence agency. 3 filing cabinets were lined up against the wall, each meticulously labeled: dues, violations, and pending. Above them hung framed certificates: HOA Leadership Seminar 2018, Community Mediation Training 2019, and her favorite, Outstanding Association Chairwoman 2021. She was drafting an official dock usage violation notice when her phone buzzed. It was a message in the HOA board group chat. "Marjorie, treasurer, did you already talk to the new guy about the dock?" Corinne, chair, yes. He was attempting to use it without permission. Alan, secretary, maybe we should welcome him first, before jumping into violations. Corinne, chair, rules come before pleasantries. That's why this neighborhood runs smoothly. She set her phone aside with a huff. People never appreciated how much work went into maintaining order. If she let one person bend the rules, the whole community would spiral into chaos. Boats tied wherever, weeds growing tall, Christmas lights left up until March. Corinne clicked print on the violation notice. The machine whirred to life. The following morning, David received his letter. Corinne made sure of it. She slipped it right into his mailbox herself. She even lingered a few moments to see if he'd check his mail early, but when he didn't, she gave a satisfied nod and strutted off. By noon, however, David wasn't just aware of the letter. He was standing at Corinne's door holding it in his hand. "Afternoon," he said when she opened. "I think there's a mistake here." Corinne raised her chin. There are no mistakes in official HOA communications. David unfolded the paper. "It says here I can't use my dock until I file a request with you, the board chair. Thing is," he held up a manila folder, "my property deed specifically lists exclusive dock rights. It's on the survey map. The dock included in my lot lines, not common property." Corinne's eyes narrowed. "Let me see that." "Happy to share," David said, handing it over. Corinne scanned the deed, her finger tracing the text. The words were as plain as day. Parcel 14 includes shoreline dock and waterway access rights. For the first time in a long while, Corinne felt the prick of doubt, but she buried it quickly under a layer of indignation. Sometimes deeds contain outdated or misfiled information. The HOA supersedes individual claims. David smirked. "Actually, the HOA can't override deeded property rights. I checked with the county records office this morning. The dock's mine." Corinne felt heat rising to her cheeks. Her fingers tightened on the paper. "You went to the county already?" "Sure did," David said. "I'm not big on surprises." The nerve, the absolute gall of this man. Most people wilted under her authority, at least at first. But here he was, 2 days into moving and already challenging her. Corinne straightened. "Well, if that's how you want to play it, then fine. but don't think this exempts you from following HOA guidelines. I'll be watching." David gave her a polite nod, the kind of nod that somehow managed to feel like a dismissal. Then he walked away, leaving Karen standing in her doorway, fists clenched at her sides. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the confrontation over and over, each time with her delivering sharper comebacks, more crushing retorts. She was the HOA chair. She was the one keeping Seabreeze Lakes from becoming a swamp of unkempt lawns and loud music and boats parked on front lawns. She needed to reassert control. So at 3 in the morning, Karen sat back down at her desk, lit only by the glow of her computer screen. She began digging, county websites, property surveys, tax records. She wasn't going to let this man waltz in and undermine her. Half an hour into her research, she stumbled across a name she hadn't expected. Waterway Supervisor, Department of Environmental Resources. Apparently, all dock owners on the lake had to comply with waterway regulations overseen by the county. Annual inspections, permits, environmental compliance, the works. Karen's lips curved into a smile. "Well, Mr. Miller," she whispered to the empty room, "let's see how your little dock holds up when the real authorities get involved." The county waterway supervisor's name was Bruce Calhoun, and to Karen, he sounded like exactly the kind of man who would appreciate her dedication to order. His voice on the phone was gruff, clipped, and just a little impatient, qualities she mistook for authority. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I can check on it," Bruce said after she explained her concerns about David's dock. "But let me be clear, our inspections deal with environmental compliance, not HOA rules." Of course, Karen said smoothly. "But what if, say, a new resident was using a dock without the proper permits, or failing to comply with shoreline regulations? Wouldn't that be something your office would want to correct?" There was a pause on the other end. "Ma'am, we don't go around issuing fines just because a neighbor's cranky about who gets to fish where, but I'll take a look when I'm in that area." Karen's jaw tightened. Cranky? Did he just call her cranky? Still, she forced a pleasant tone. "Thank you, Supervisor Calhoun. I'll look forward to your visit." She hung up and exhaled. This was it, the moment she'd bring David Miller to heel. 3 days later, Bruce's county truck pulled up beside the lake, the logo for Department of Environmental Resources emblazoned on the side. Karen was already waiting on her porch, hair immaculately styled, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of office. She intercepted him before he even reached David's property. "Supervisor Calhoun," she said brightly, "so glad you could make it if you'll follow me." "Hold up," Bruce lifted a hand. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a permanent sunburn and the weary eyes of someone who had seen one too many neighborhood squabbles. "You filed the complaint, right?" "Not a complaint," Karen corrected quickly. "A community concern. We pride ourselves on maintaining standards in Seabreeze Lakes." Bruce gave her a long look, then sighed. "Fine, show me the dock." Karen practically glided across the grass, her heels stabbing into the lawn like exclamation points. "Right this way. You'll see Mr. Miller has been flagrantly disregarding." But her triumphant speech faltered when she saw David already waiting by the dock, leaning casually against his boat like he'd been expecting this exact moment. "Morning," he called, his tone infuriatingly calm. "You must be the supervisor." "That's right," Bruce said, already pulling out a clipboard of his own. "Hear about your dock." "Great," David replied. He pulled a thick folder from under his arm and handed it over. "Here. Everything you'll need: permits, inspections, maintenance logs. I called your office after Mrs. Whitmore's visit the other day. Figured this was coming." Karen's jaw dropped. You already filed permits." David didn't even look at her. "Yep, doc. Been on record since '92. Previous owner kept it up to code. I double-checked when I bought the house. You know me, don't like surprises." Bruce flipped through the paperwork, nodding. "Looks good. Structure's legal. Environmental clearance is up to date. No issues here." Karen's cheeks burned hot. But the shoreline erosion and the noise pollution from his boat, and what about the algae growth? Someone has to regulate it." Bruce leveled her with a look that could curdle milk. "Ma'am, algae happens. It's a lake. Unless you've got photos of him dumping fertilizer straight into the water, this isn't a violation. As for noise, that's law enforcement, not us. And shoreline erosion looks stable to me." David coughed politely. Would you like to check the supports? I had them reinforced last spring. Bruce gave him an approving nod. Smart prevents collapse. Karen's hands clenched around her clipboard. This was supposed to be her victory. Instead, the two men were bonding over dock supports like old fishing buddies. So we're done here? David asked with a smile. Looks like it, Bruce confirmed, tucking the paperwork back into his folder. He gave Karen a pointed glance. Word of advice, ma'am, don't waste county time with neighbor squabbles. We've got real violations to handle. And just like that, he was gone, climbing back into his truck and driving off. The humiliation was unbearable. Karen felt the sting of it all day, like a sunburn that wouldn't fade. She avoided the neighbors, afraid they'd somehow know she'd failed. By evening, she was packing her kitchen, ranting to herself. He thinks he's clever, running to the county before I could, and that supervisor condescending dismissive, oh, algae happens, that's his expert advice. She slammed a cupboard shut. Unbelievable. Her phone buzzed, a message in the HOA group chat. Marjorie, treasurer, heard the county came out to check David's dock today. Everything good. Alan's secretary, yeah, I saw the truck, looked official. What happened, Karen? Karen, chair, everything is under control. No violations were found yet. She added the yet like a warning shot. But in truth, her confidence was shaken. For the first time in years, she felt like she'd lost control of the board, the neighborhood, the narrative. The next weekend, matters got worse. Karen was trimming her roses when she overheard laughter drifting from the lake. She peered through the hedges and saw David entertaining half a dozen neighbors on his dock, grilling burgers, music playing softly, kids splashing in the shallows. Her neighbors, her people. And they were smiling at him like he was the best thing to happen to Seabreeze Lakes since the invention of screened porches. Marjorie was there, sipping a soda. Alan, too, actually helping David tie off his boat. Even the perpetually grumpy Hendersons were laughing at some joke. Karen's grip on the shears tightened until her knuckles went white. It wasn't just about the dock anymore. David was winning the neighborhood. That night she drafted a new plan. If the county wouldn't help and the HOA board was wavering, she'd have to find another angle, something undeniable, something that would remind everyone why she was in charge. And then she found it, the HOA's landscaping regulations. A smile crept across her face as she flipped through the bylaws, highlighting section after section. Grass height, tree trimming, hedge placement. There was no shortage of potential infractions. If she couldn't sink him with the dock, she'd bury him in paperwork. Karen always believed the devil was in the details. And in Seabreeze Lakes, the details were written in 12-point Times New Roman, black and white, right there in the HOA bylaws. Section 4.2, Subclause A. All lawns must be maintained to a height not exceeding 3.5 inches. Section 5.1, Subclause C. Hedges must not obstruct neighborly sightlines or lakefront views. Section 7.4. Any tree overhanging common walkways must be trimmed to a clearance of 8 feet. Most people ignored these sections, trimming their lawns when they remembered, hacking away at hedges when they got scruffy. But Karen didn't ignore them. She lived by them. And now she would wield them like weapons. The next morning, armed with her clipboard and a fresh stack of notice of violation forms, Karen marched across the neighborhood like a sheriff on patrol. Her first stop, David's lawn. She crouched down, ruler in hand, measuring the blades of grass near his mailbox. 4 inches, she noted with relish, out of compliance. She scribbled down the violation, affixed it to his door, and marched on. Next, his hedges. Slightly overgrown, perhaps, but not outrageous. Still, with creative interpretation, she could argue they blocked sightlines of the lake. Another citation. Finally, the tree near his driveway, a thick oak, its branches arched comfortably over the road. Karen stretched her tape measure upward, squinting in the morning sun. 7 feet, 10 inches, 2 whole inches too low. Perfect. By the time she was done, David's front door looked like a notice board plastered with fluorescent HOA paper. Karen stepped back, satisfied. Checkmate. But her campaign didn't stop there. After all, to target only David would look suspicious. She had to maintain the appearance of fairness. So she cited the Hendersons for their mailbox paint chipping. She cited Marjorie for leaving her trash bins visible past pickup day. She cited Alan for a lawn gnome that technically violated decor uniformity standards. By dusk, half the neighborhood had received at least one notice. Corinne slept soundly that night for the first time in weeks. The peace didn't last. On Saturday morning, the HOA clubhouse filled with angry residents. Corinne sat at the head of the long folding table, papers neatly stacked, her gavel within easy reach. "Order," she said firmly as the chatter rose. "This is the monthly association meeting and will follow procedure. Each concern will be heard in turn." Marjorie was the first to speak, slapping her bright pink violation notice onto the table. "Trash bins? Really, Corinne? The garbage truck was late, you know that." "The rule states bins must be removed the day of pickup," Corinne replied smoothly. "No exceptions." Alan leaned forward, waving his own notice. "A lawn gnome, Corinne? That thing's been in my yard for 8 years. Nobody ever complained." "Uniformity standards clearly prohibit ornamental figures exceeding 12 inches, Corinne recited. Murmurs of discontent spread through the room. And then David stood. He didn't slam his papers down. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held up his citations like they were trophies. "Grass, hedges, tree clearance. 3 violations in one day. You measured my blades of grass with a ruler, didn't you, Corinne?" A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Corinne flushed but forced a tight smile. "The bylaws are clear. If you wish to live in this community, you must abide by them." David's smile widened. "Funny thing is, I did abide by them. My lawn was cut 2 days before you came snooping with your ruler. It grew half an inch since then. Natural process. Are you saying we're all supposed to cut our grass every 48 hours? The room erupted in chuckles. Even Marjorie smirked. Corinne banged her gavel. "Order, order." But David wasn't done. "And the hedges, you called them overgrown, but they're well within trimming standards. As for the tree, I already scheduled it for maintenance. I'm not negligent, I'm proactive." Applause broke out, real applause. Corinne's gavel cracked against the table. "Enough. This meeting is not a circus. This is about standards and accountability." But she could feel it slipping. The control, the respect, the obedience she'd cultivated for years. After the meeting, Marjorie cornered her in the parking lot. "Corinne, listen," she said gently. "We appreciate what you've done for the neighborhood. You've kept things organized, you fought off bad developments, you've been diligent. But this feels personal. People aren't happy." Corinne stiffened. "Personal? I'm enforcing the rules equally." Marjorie gave her a sad smile. "No, Corinne, you're weaponizing them, and everyone sees it." She walked away, leaving Corinne standing alone, her clipboard suddenly feeling heavy in her hands. That night, Corinne sat in her office, staring at the rows of binders and folders that had once given her pride. Now they looked like prison bars. She thought back to when she first joined the HOA. She wanted to protect the neighborhood, to make it a place people were proud to live. She had made a difference: new playground equipment, potholes filled, a successful fight against a tacky strip mall proposal. But somewhere along the way, the mission had shifted. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about power. About being the one who knew the rules best, who controlled them, who decided who was in and who was out. Her reflection in the office window looked tired, older, harder. For the first time in years, Corinne wondered if she'd gone too far. But then, just as doubt began to creep in, she received a text. "Unknown number, heard about your dock problem. You're right, county doesn't enforce half the stuff they should. Maybe we should talk." Corinne stared at the message, pulse quickening. Someone out there was on her side. Someone who saw what she saw, a neighborhood teetering on the edge of chaos, one man away from ruin. She didn't know who the message was from, but she knew one thing: her fight wasn't over. Corinne didn't usually respond to anonymous messages, but something about this one, the timing, the validation, made her fingers itch to type back. "Corinne, who is this?" "Unknown number, someone who hates seeing bylaws ignored. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lakeside Cafe." Her heart thudded. An ally, maybe even a powerful one. For weeks, she'd felt like the whole neighborhood was turning against her, but here was proof she wasn't alone. The next afternoon, Corinne arrived at the cafe early, clipboard in hand. She sat near the window, scanning the parking lot. At precisely 2, a man in a gray suit walked in. Tall, clean-cut, with the vaguely polished look of someone used to boardrooms. He spotted her instantly and strode over. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes," Corinne said, standing. "Daniel Pierce. I'm a consultant." Work with several HOAs in the county. Heard your association's been struggling with compliance. Struggling, the word stung. We're not struggling, Karen said crisply. We're maintaining standards. Others are undermining them. Daniel smiled in a way that was both reassuring and unsettling. Exactly. That's why I reached out. I help HOAs strengthen enforcement, close loopholes, protect property values. People like Miller, they don't scare me. I can make sure they don't scare you either. Karen felt a rush of relief. Finally, someone understood. That night, she couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't humiliation keeping her awake. It was excitement. Daniel had given her strategies, legal angles she hadn't considered. He'd even hinted at drafting amendments to the bylaws that would tighten control over waterfront properties. She imagined unveiling the changes at the next HOA meeting, restoring her authority in one sweeping motion. But then a thought crept in. What if the board didn't back her? What if the neighbors resisted again? Karen pushed it away. Daniel had assured her, power is about presentation. If you act like it's inevitable, they'll follow. And Karen knew presentation. The following week, she convened a special session of the HOA. The room was packed, curiosity buzzing. Even people who usually skipped meetings had shown up. Karen stood at the front, binder in hand, shoulders squared. Residents of Seabreeze Lakes, she began, voice steady. In recent weeks, we've faced challenges to our rules, to our authority, to the standards that protect our community. I will not allow our neighborhood to decline into chaos. That's why I propose these amendments to the bylaws. She handed copies down the table. Marjorie scanned hers, eyes widening. Karen, this would require permits for any dock maintenance, even by private owners. That's extreme. It's necessary, Karen shot back. Otherwise, people like Miller exploit loopholes. This ensures fairness. Alan frowned. Fairness or control? Murmurs spread across the room. David leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching. His calm expression infuriated her. Order, Karen barked, banging her gavel. We will vote on these amendments tonight. It is the only way to protect our property values. But then David stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I went ahead and did something I should have done weeks ago, he said. I filed a request with the county, not for my dock, for a community oversight review of this HOA. Gasps filled the room. Karen's blood ran cold. You what? The county will send an auditor to evaluate whether our association is operating within its legal authority. They'll review our bylaws, our enforcement methods, even our finances. All eyes turned to Karen. She slammed her gavel down. This is outrageous. You have no right. Actually, David said calmly, state law gives every homeowner that right. Section 720.305, Florida statutes, I checked. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She knew the statute. She had quoted it once years ago when it had suited her. Now it was a blade pointed at her throat. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Neighbors whispered, argued, demanded answers. Karen tried to shout above the noise, but the harder she pushed, the more they resisted. Finally, Marjorie stood. Karen, we've respected you for years. You've done good work, but this is too much. We can't support these amendments. Alan nodded. Agreed, we need to table this until after the audit. The gavel slipped in Karen's hand. She banged it anyway, more out of desperation than authority. You're making a mistake. Without strong leadership, this neighborhood will fall apart. But nobody listened. That night, Karen sat in her office, staring at the stack of rejected amendments. For the first time, she wondered if she'd lost, truly lost. Her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. Daniel, don't worry. Auditors can be persuaded. Let's meet again soon. Karen's hand hovered over the screen. Part of her wanted to delete the message, to finally walk away from the fight. But another part, the part that had driven her this far, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the lifeline she needed. She set the phone down without replying. Out the window, she could see the glow of David's dock lights across the lake. Voices carried faintly over the water, laughter, music, the sounds of a gathering. Karen clenched her jaw. He hadn't just won the dock, he was winning the neighborhood. And Karen Whitmore didn't lose, not for long.